Life is this.
I guess today I still don't have anything really to talk about today. It's a fairly regular sort of a day. It's been a normal day. Nothing of note really has happened. I think that kind of links back to feeling like I'm in a slump. I guess. And I want to be able to put something out there. Trying a new angle. Not gonna lie, there's a bit of a ulterior motive to the new angle. I'm wearing a shirt from a really cool guy that makes watches, custom watches, parking watches. Bought this shirt from him ages ago now, when I bought, essentially it was my first ever watch. Back then it was not it wasn't a custom watch, but one day I'm going to get him to do me an absolute premium job, because he does awesome work. Check him out. Parking watches. Anyway, that's the main reason, so people can see the sick shirt he does. I like to. He's been a big supporter of us when it comes to our boxes. Always like to be able to support, people where I can. I suppose that's something that I could probably sort of talk about. It's not so much revolving around pregnancy and children, but supporting those small sort of businesses, supporting Australian businesses. For the last probably 12 months, sort of got to a position where I'm able to show a bit more support for small Australian businesses. And when we decided that we were going to do the boxes, it was something that we wanted to achieve was by using small Australian businesses or New Zealand businesses, because the Kiwis have got some cool shit too. And it's reflected, I think, in the price of our boxes. Like, we don't look at making heaps of money out of them. I've talked about that before. But we try our best to be able to support those small Australian businesses. Everything that we've gotten product-wise that goes into the boxes from those small businesses. So I'm saying businesses too much. It's just something that we try and focus on, and then we try and also focus on that in our regular life, the things we buy as well. We actually had a conversation with my missus a little while ago, and I said all of my clothes come from, they're either they're merch from a podcast or a small company, or they're made by a small Australian company. We posted the other day about my collection of hats, which I seem to have accumulated quite a few. And I did a bit of a shout out for a lot of those small businesses that I do follow and try and support. Various podcasts, the Alpha Blokes, Two Flogs, the Dead Ass Podcast, Proper True Yarn, Dusty Boots Podcast. There, support them. Other small businesses like Buck & Co, Jam Timber Co, Young at Heart, just a few CTC. I sort of get around that, obviously, so I enjoy having those sort of hats as a bit of a just a way to show support. That doesn't cost me a great deal of money. It becomes a lot of money when you have a mild obsession the way that I do. But so a lot of these businesses and podcasters and influencers that I've supported, it helps them, but there's other companies that we try and sort of deal with as well, for our regular everyday items where we can. Mingle Seasonings do some awesome stuff. Sauces, we cannot get enough of it. Tomato and barbecue sauce, just awesome. If I could buy a 4-litre bucket or a 5-litre bucket, I would. And we found that, especially with the kids, the older kids, that when we sort of got away from the super high processed recipe bases and sauces and stuff like that, that they're a bit more calm. They're not so up and down. So that's one. There's just other bits and pieces where we try and buy where we can online from small companies, and I don't know, it feels to me, I felt better knowing that my money's going to a family. Families of locals. Obviously convenience for people going to Coles and Woolworths and all those big supermarkets. But sort of in a position that we can kind of do that at the moment, but in saying that, with sort of recent events, that's going to change. It becomes harder and harder just to be able to keep supporting those businesses, You know, start watching sort of how much money we spend in certain places. And, a lot of the things, depending on what you're buying. I suppose that's to be sort of the subject of today. It comes up with about money. When it comes to pregnancy and children and babies, people sort of go, oh, it's so expensive, children and all that sort of stuff. And And it can be, definitely can be. And I've joked with my missus, and I've said, with this baby, it's essentially the same as starting a small business. The upfront cost can be phenomenal, but depending on sort of what happens, your costs come down, and hopefully then you start to make a bit of profit. We chose to do both at the same time, sort of. The baby was not entirely, it wasn't prevented, but it wasn't expected. He was not expected at all. And then obviously the business come about because of him. So doing both at the same time became very, very expensive. Especially when we were trying our hardest to be able to get all our products from Australian companies, which they did their best. Like all the companies that we've got our supplies from, they've done our best to give us their best price on stock that we can put into these items and these products. But at the end of the day, it's still, we got to pay for the quality, and because it is such good quality stuff, we pay that. But I think it becomes the way it sort of relates to pregnancy is especially if you're new, it's your first child, there's so much stuff to buy, which is another thing we'll probably touch on later. There's your big ticket items, obviously a cot, car seat, pram, and there's way more other things. It's just little bits and pieces that, depending on your budget and I suppose what you require, what you have, can be affected. It all adds up very quickly. So obviously that, then if that's happening, clothes takes so much because you need so many of them. Anyway, but that adds to the stress. Money can become one of the biggest stresses during pregnancy, and in the few years, depending on what happens after birth. So that's always something I think that a lot of couples can fight about and start to argue about, and obviously the stress becomes worse, and that's where you can start to get that disconnection from your partner. And to be honest, there's no big cure for it. It can be expensive. There's ways around it for it not to be so expensive, but either way, you could be going from a two-person income to just a single-person income. Like if you weren't that well off in the first place, then all this outward expense can sometimes put people into debt. And it just becomes an ongoing thing where it just adds to that pressure. I think when it comes to money, you just got to try your best, I suppose. And you need to be up front with your partner. If your partner wants a certain thing, but because there can be a lot of times where you sort of look and you go, oh, we want, you know, this big flash pram. I'm telling you, it's just to carry the kid. As long as the wheels don't fall off, it'll be fine. You know, like, I know that some people can be very particular about what they buy for their babies. And if you're in the position where you can do that, go for it. If you want to be able to, if you want to make the sacrifices so that you can afford different sorts of things, then go for it. But don't spend a heap of money on a pram that you don't need. You know, don't spend $1,000 on a pram when a $200 one will do just as good a job. Especially if that's going to put you into a state of financial hardship, and then you're eventually going to end up arguing about it later. I feel like I just ramble so much with these. I don't plan anything. I don't really write anything down. I don't know, I'd like to be raw and upfront with everybody. If that gets views and helps people out, then so be it. If it doesn't, I think it's kind of starting to help me. Being able to kind of talk about certain things that I usually wouldn't. Even though it's to everybody. Anybody can see this. But like I've said before, like a lot of people say that do, I guess, this sort of content, we do it for a reason. We do it so that we can help people not feel so overwhelmed or feel bad because they feel a certain way. I think that was something I've experienced fairly regularly. You know, so it's just sort of, I want to be able to help people, make people feel better. Inform people where I can. Granted, I'm no expert. I'm literally just giving advice. Remember that. Always remember, I am definitely not an expert. And 99% of the times, what works, something that works for, you know, my missus during pregnancy that we tried, it's not going to work for anybody else. Quite home, but I don't think I really want to waffle on too much. But we'll definitely talk about some costings and ways that me and my missus tried to sort of save money when it comes to the upfront cost of a baby. See if that helps somebody. Anyway, like I always say, stay safe and definitely look after each other.